Afternoon, everyone. It's officially afternoon since it's 12:02 p.m. I'm very happy to welcome you to this next in our series of education events for our members. It's titled Wellness and You. We're very excited to have this for you today. All of our education series have been very well received. I will remind you that we are taping this, so if you have friends who missed it or you want to refer back, you'll get a link to the recording, and we'll also post it on our website. We're hoping that today you will put your video on if you're comfortable doing so. We are going to ask you to keep yourself muted unless you want to ask a question. If you stay muted, it helps with the background noise for everyone. Kenny Putterman is our speaker today, and she will be taking some pauses at points during the program where it'll be a logical place. If you have a question to ask that question, you can unmute yourself at that point. Also, if you're a little on the shy side and don't want to do it through unmuting yourself, you can post a question in the chat feature. That is, if you scroll down to the bottom of your Zoom room, that feature will pop up and you can click on it and type in a chat question that will be answered. Staff will be monitoring that so that we can get all your questions answered. So right now, what I'd like to do is introduce you to our speaker. Kenny Lee Putterman is a social impact consultant who is dedicated to strengthening the resilience, wellness, and capacity for change for mission-driven organizations and individuals. She's the principal consultant for KP Consultants, which was established in 2015 and offers a range of consulting services, including project management support, technical assistance, strategy development, collateral brand design, stakeholder facilitation and engagement, implementation science, and learning and development. That's a lot.
It is.
Kenny has developed and delivered training for the City and County of Denver, the Department of Human Services, Colorado AmeriCorps, and child welfare and juvenile justice professionals across the country. She authored and led Strengthening Resilience and Addressing Secondary Traumatic Stress, a trauma responsive series focused on enhancing self-awareness and mental agility for the Colorado Office of Behavioral Health. She received her Master's of Social Work from the University of Pennsylvania. She lived in Philly for 5 years.
Yes, ma'am.
She has a favorite cheesesteak place. But she also holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Wheaton College. And without further ado, I welcome Kenny Putterman. Thank you so much, Kenny.
Thanks so much, Pam. I'm so happy to be here with all of you. I wish we were together in person, but this is the new normal. So here we are. We have an hour to spend together, and I really hope that it's meaningful and you get something out of today. So let's get started. So here is a picture here in Denver. And why are we here today? So we are taking an intentional pause today to reflect, to assess how you're doing, right? Your wellness is so important to the work that you do. And so Pam and I had designed this workshop to really enhance and support your wellness during this extremely challenging and difficult time. So that's why we're here. There's intentionality behind it. You know, the association is nothing without their people. And if your people are not well, the work will not get done. So this is an intentional time to really stop, to pause, to think about how you're doing. There's been a lot going on. And I want you to really think about that and take that with you as we move through the content for today. So as Pam said, thanks for that great introduction. I am Kenny Putterman. I received my master's in social work from UPenn and began my professional career doing extremely clinical work. So I was a therapist for individuals and families, and I quickly burnt out. I had vicarious trauma. I was doing sex sex abuse protection work in Philadelphia. So it was very intense. It was a lot. And I had to take an intentional pause for myself to reflect on my wellness. I needed to put myself first and foremost and check in and see what I needed to do to sustain my mental health and my well-being. So I kind of switched and pivoted my career and launched more into learning and development space. So I am a national trainer on wellness, trauma-informed practice, and resilience. These are the things that bring me joy, that fill me up, that are my passions. As Pam said, I live in Denver, but I am an East Coast girl. I would give a shout out to Jim's for the steak, Philly cheesesteak, that's my spot. And as I said, I'm so grateful we have this time together. So I'm going to move through the content. There's a lot to cover, but I'm going to pause and ask if anyone has any questions. I would love to hear from you. If you want to share an experience, make a comment, or ask something, I would love to hear from you. So does anybody else feel like it has been 9 years since March? And someone just told me that March is quickly approaching, only 4 months away, which blows my mind. So this is what my quarantine has looked like. I live in a 1-bedroom apartment with my partner, Natalie, and our cat, Tommy, and she also works from home full time. We just began a 2-week quarantine today in order to travel out of state for Thanksgiving. So I share this because I deeply believe in showing up to these workshops as my authentic self. And what I mean by that is that I am a professional, I am an expert, I'm also a person. And you are professionals, but you're also just people. And so I want you to have some kindness and grace with yourself and really think about what life has been like for you and what you envision life being like moving forward in the next coming months and the winter months especially. So I always, in my workshops, have my version of ground rules. So I like to say, when I join a workshop, I want to co-create a space full of grace. And this is what I mean by that. I'm asking you for today, or when you listen to this recording, to show up exactly as you are. So we have all been individually affected by what has happened. We have all had different experiences, situations, impacts, emotions, you name it. So show up as you are. There's no right or wrong. I want you to show up and acknowledge what you've been through, how this has felt for you, what you've experienced, and share those. The second tenet is a growth mindset. What we know is that having a growth mindset, meaning you're ever learning and ever becoming, is actually a key variable in increasing your resilience. So some of the material might be new. Some of it may not, but some of the practices and strategies that I'm going to give you today are going to need to be applied with a growth mindset. You can't just make an assumption that you're going to be perfect at something new, as you start it. So pace yourself, be kind to yourself. You're learning, you're growing, we're ever becoming. And the third is a call for shared humanity. So yes, we have all been affected by this pandemic and this bizarre time differently. We've all experienced different things, but we've also all collectively experienced it. Sometimes it's really hard to think about the collective whole. And so this is a reminder that we've all been through this together. So you're not alone. We've all moved through this unknown, bizarre, weird, unexpected period together. So there's a call for shared humanity in recognizing what we've gone through and how we move forward together. So in delivering trainings all across the country, I've been charged with this question of, how do you make sense and meaning of what has happened? There is so much. So I deeply believe that the context of this conversation matters, right? We're talking about your wellness being directly impacted by what's going on around us. So we've had COVID, a global pandemic. We've had the Black Lives Matter movement, fight for racial justice, economic crisis. People have really been hit by what has occurred, small businesses. Devastating wildfires. You might know somebody who lost their home or who was directly impacted. And a country divided. We just had an enormous presidential election. So this is a lot. This is so much to hold. And I want to, and I intentionally include this slide to acknowledge that. I want to name it. And I want you to recognize that, wow, that's a lot. And every day it's been shifting, right? And so your mental health and your wellness might have been having a parallel process. So you're shifting with it, up and down, right? You're riding this wave. So I want you to think about the confluence of crises and how it's intersected with your own wellness and well-being. So I want to ask you guys, this is an opportunity to hear from you guys. What changes has your association experienced on an organizational level and an individual level? I'd love if you want to just unmute or type in the chat box, because I don't know, right? I'm not a realtor, but I want to hear from you. What are the changes that you have experienced?
Kenny, I can add just on the BCAR level, one of the positives that has come out of this is that we are engaging with members that we typically would not engage with other than in maybe a CE class. This education series is one example of us being able to pull members in that we typically would not, be talking to. So that's a good change.
Yeah,
Obviously,
I love a good change.
Yeah.
Yes.
I don't want to get into the downside of COVID because we'll be here forever. But
Yeah.
That's what I can offer from the positives.
Absolutely. So it's an opportunity to engage and connect and build some relationships with maybe people you wouldn't have in a virtual capacity. Anything else that someone wants to mention about changes that you have experienced individually or within the association? No one?
I would like to.
I would love that.
I've been in the Realtor for quite a number of years, and I've always used my gut instincts to read people with facial expressions to know whether they really like the house or not. When they bring a mother who doesn't speak English and she's got the deciding vote, I could tell by her facial expressions whether this is the house or not. And now with wearing masks, I feel like my hands are tied behind my back and I no longer can use a skill that I have learned, and it's instinct to me now. It's not even anything I think about. And that's gone. It's like walking into a brick wall every time I meet a stranger,
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad you shared that. I'm sure so many people can relate. We're having a real inability to connect, right? All you're seeing is somebody's eyes. And so it's really hard to, practice awareness and be attuned to somebody else when you can't see their facial expression. So absolutely, I can imagine this is a new, challenge and something you're having to adapt to. Thanks for sharing. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
Here's a couple other things that I believe you have experienced that were shared with me. So, the entire state had shut down. You were unable to work. There was an economic impact and a frustration component with that. There's probably a new reliance on technology. This might be new for some of you, right? Relying on Zoom or having Skype meetings or whatever. You're having adaptive ways to cultivate new relationships. This is what you talked about, Pam, but also what you talked about, Marcia, right? You're having to cultivate relationships differently. It's looking differently. You're needing to adapt, be flexible, and shift. And I'm sure, and I can make an assumption, is that you're extremely busy. It's a competitive arena. This is a seller's market. I've been looking here in Denver and whoo, my goodness. And so these are some of the things that you've been experiencing individually or within your work sphere. So the question is, how does this impact you? And what might you be experiencing because you're having to hold and process and move and navigate through all of that change? So in doing all of these trainings across the country at different associations, corporations, nonprofits, government, there are prominent themes that have come across that people seem to be experiencing. So I'm going to read through this list. Take a mental checklist as I move through. Think to yourself, maybe that's what I'm experiencing. Do any of these resonate with you? Exhaustion, right? People are tired. People want to go back to normal life, right? Irritability, things that maybe didn't bother you before are now triggering you, and you are just 0 to 100 very quickly. You might feel overwhelmed. You're like, I can't handle another thing. My plate is full. Brain fog, this ability to not be able to concentrate. You're like, I read that sentence 8 times. I still don't know what it means, right? This feeling of all over the place. You feel scattered. You're having a really hard time grounding yourself or regulating your emotions. You might feel unmotivated. Things might feel trivial right now. Why am I doing this, right? When there's so many bigger causes going on. You might have difficulty sleeping. You might have problems falling asleep, staying asleep. Maybe all you want to do is sleep, right? You might be withdrawn. You might have a really flat affect, right? Things that maybe brought you joy before don't anymore. You might have some depressive undertones. You might have physical body aches. You might just ache and not feel like your best self. Hair loss, pimples, that adult acne is real, gut and digestion issues, and headaches. So just pause, think to yourself if any of those resonate for you. I will tell you, I love these graphics by Liz and Molly. They're going to be throughout the presentation. I think they just so perfectly illustrate what we've been going through. So think about all of that. Now, let's make sense of that. I think it's a coincidence that some of you might be feeling those things and me and others across the country? No, there is an explanation. So I spent most of my career, if not all of it, focused on trauma-informed work, looking at trauma and how it affects your brain and your functioning. So let's talk about what this means. We are living in a sea of uncertainty and unpredictability. We are used to stability and predictability, right? You have a routine. You feel like you have mastery and competence. You know what you're doing. You're like, I got this. What is happening is our brains are hardwired to assess for threat and risk, which is a great mechanism when things are predictable and stable. They're detecting patterns based on our prior experiences, right? I'm going to assess the situation, and then I'm going to determine if I'm at threat or if this is a risk. So what is happening is we are actually maintaining a chronic level of stress, and it's causing our brains to have an inability to hit baseline and reset. So our brains are sitting in overdrive, in this fight or flight response. Should I run? Should I protect myself? You're constantly assessing because things don't feel safe right now. This is actually a really good protective coping. Our brains have shifted away from creativity and long-term thinking, right? I'm going to travel the world, and these are my dreams and my 5-year plan, and has switched to day-to-day survival, protection, and anticipation of a threat, right? So these chronic stress levels are leaving our brain swimming in a hormone known as cortisol. We're having an inability to reset, and stress can be good, right? There's healthy stress. So having a baby, buying a house, getting a new job, getting a promotion, buying a car, all of those are healthy stressors that's actually beneficial for your brain to experience. What becomes problematic is when you're sitting in this chronic stress level zone and you're not leaving. It's not going away. And unfortunately, because of the situation we're in, there is no end date. And so our brain is protecting and replying to that message in the best way it knows how, which is to stay on alert. So this is the key and the biggest takeaway of the trauma piece is all of this is impacting us differently. So the crux of trauma-informed care is that 2 people could experience a traumatic event, the same event together, and be impacted completely differently. So I want you to think about how this has impacted you. If you have a trauma history, if you have a mental health diagnosis, if you have been struggling before the pandemic, how has this impacted you now, right? It's impacting us all differently. And if it hasn't impacted you that much, you feel okay, you're surviving, you're doing the best you can, maybe it's impacting your colleague, your friend, your family member. So it's really important to remind yourself that there's no right or wrong way of how to respond or to feel to this, but instead acknowledge and recognize that all of us are going to feel differently. So I'm going to pause here and ask if there's any questions, because I know that was a lot, very quickly. Any questions from anyone?
We do have a couple comments in the chat.
Yes.
I think this was relating to, issues, what's bothering us and what's going on. And one person said low inventory buyers and sellers are uncomfortable with the process of buying, selling real estate, keeping motivated,
Yes.
motivating sales team. And then somebody else just responded and said, same as the person, motivation and how to motivate the team is a bigger task than I remember. Motivation conversations seem trite and not applicable to this world. It's hard to do anything sincerely besides busy work.
Absolutely. I'm so glad you shared those. I talk about this and I bring it into the conversation. I want to name it because that's validating, right? That for someone who might be experiencing this and all of these emotions by themselves might feel very isolated in their feelings. So to hear from other people, hey, me too. Hey, I also am having a hard time. I'm also struggling to motivate my team. You're not alone. These are really normal, healthy responses to what's occurring. So there's nothing wrong with you. All right. So that was a little bit of a downer, right? That was a lot. So let's just take a breath, right? There's some hope. Okay, so let's move into that. Let's talk about the stuff you can control, the sphere of influence where you can control your responses, your reactions, your knowledge, and let's talk about that. So I structure my workshop in presenting 5 components of wellness. Now, when things are hard and difficult, people usually greet me by saying, Kenny, tell me what to do. Give me the checklist. I want to do it right now because I don't want to feel crappy anymore. Okay. And what I'm going to tell you is I'm going to disappoint you because I'm not going to give you a checklist and I'm not going to tell you what to do because I don't know what's going to work for you. So actually, this is a practice of equitable resilience, meaning that we all have unique needs and I don't know what's going to be helpful for you or effective for you. So I'm not going to tell you to meditate, do yoga, get on an antidepressant, eat vegetables, and take a bubble bath. Those are a menu of options. Some of those might work, but instead I'm going to present to you components of wellness as a framework that are applicable to all facets of your life. So your work life, your home life, your relationships, these are key components that can help you take care of your wellness and strengthen your resilience moving forward past the pandemic. I always like to talk about wellness as a holistic practice. So I'm going to provide some strategies and techniques for you. You need to assess if it works or not. Take it or leave it. Not all of them are going to resonate with you, and that's okay. Some of these aren't rocket science. So some of these you might already be doing, and that's great. Some of them might be new and require some practice. So that's where we're going to apply that growth mindset. I want you to ask questions, share your experiences. This is for you, and I want it to be meaningful. So let's kick off right into the content for the first component, self-awareness. I would love to hear from someone. Why do you think self-awareness is a component of wellness? What do you think? Anyone? Why do you think this is included in the list?
Because you need to realize what's going on with your body and yourself before you can do anything about it.
Absolutely. Nailed it. So self-awareness embodies a mantra of begin with you. So you need to know and you need to be self-aware to know how you're feeling, what you're experiencing, and how you're reacting to something. So let's define self-awareness so we're all on the same page. So self-awareness is having an awareness of the interplay or the interconnectedness between your thoughts, your feelings, and behaviors. You cannot have one without the other. They interplay together. You can't separate them out. So self-awareness of your physical sensations, right? Your hands are sweating, you're, maybe having a migraine, your moods, your emotions, you're having those mood swings, right? Like that swing picture. Your desires, they might be ever changing, your thoughts and your thinking patterns. This is my favorite part about self-awareness, which people often overlook. You need to have self-awareness in order to have empathy for others. Empathy meaning, I am going to connect within myself the feeling that you're experiencing and be able to sit with that person. It's not, oh, I understand. I might not. It's not my circumstance. But I need to be self-aware to connect within myself. Oh, wow, they're really struggling. I know what that's like. To be able to connect and provide empathy for that person. So in developing this workshop, I like to put together some probing questions that you can practice in your everyday interactions, and you can have them at your desk, at your nightstand, wherever. So these are some questions to ask yourself that apply to self-awareness. When you're having a real strong reaction or response to something, I want you to ask yourself, what is happening for me? What am I feeling? Can I identify and name the feeling? What is my emotional capacity and bandwidth right now? You might be really burnt out, right? You need to check in with yourself. How is working from home, living alone, not being able to do things I love, etc., impacting you? You need to check in and ask yourself. What happens to my ability to practice self-awareness when I'm stressed, depleted, worried, or overwhelmed? My guess is that you lack self-awareness, right? It goes right out the window because you're like, I just got to survive. I just got to manage, right? Observe, ask yourself what happens. Have other mental health issues been exacerbated during this time? You need to check in with yourself to know the answer. I don't know, okay? Any questions about self-awareness before we move on? Okay. So the second component is assessing your needs. So once you are self-aware, right, you're checking in with yourself, you're attuned to your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors, you're able to assess your needs. Now, needs is very tricky and they're abstract, but it's my favorite one as a therapist. So let me tell you what I mean by needs. So needs, which comes from a Maslow hierarchy of needs, they are not static. So needs change and they shift. What I mean by that is I am an extrovert through and through. So usually when I want to recharge, I want to recharge with other people. That's my need, right? I like to be social. I want to recharge with others. During this pandemic, what I've actually realized is that my need is to recharge alone, right? So a need is shifting and changing constantly. Needs are not services or activities. Now, this one people usually get really caught up on. Here's an example. The need is not going to the gym. Okay, that is the service or the activity. The need is underneath. So the need is I want to move my body. I want to connect with myself physically. I want to get my heart rate up. Okay, another one. I'm going to call a friend. That is the service or the activity. The need is underneath, right? I want to feel connected to someone. I want to maybe have someone validate my feelings and provide empathy for me. So think about your needs as underneath what the service or activity is and using the service or activity to meet that need. Needs are not deficits. So having needs does not mean there's something wrong with you or you're not doing enough. No, we are all humans. We all have needs, period. And we all have unique needs, just like the trauma piece. So my needs are going to be different than your needs, and your needs are going to be different than mine. When we lack boundaries, we are not acknowledging or honoring our own needs. We're going to talk about boundaries in a second. And assessing your own needs allows you to help others with their overload. If you practice self-awareness and you assess your needs, you'll be able to know what you can provide to somebody else. Actually, what I need is to take a vacation and have a timeout and turn my phone off, right? So I can't be there for you. I'm really sorry. Can we come up with a plan? Can we touch base later? So questions to ask yourself as they pertain to needs. What are my needs? And what are my unmet needs? Most of the time when you're having a reaction or response, it's because you have an unmet need. Do I have new needs that perhaps weren't there before? I hear from a lot of people, my need is that I need a vacation from my family. I have no privacy. I have no alone time. I want to sit in my car and lock the doors, and that's my need. How can I advocate for my own needs? This is the biggest one. So needs are paired with communication. You can't just have needs and then keep them to yourself and never tell anyone. No one is a mind reader. So how can you advocate for your own needs? What boundaries do I have in place to protect my needs? What does that look like? And are there opportunities for me to strengthen boundaries or practice setting new ones? This might be at home, at work, with clients, with relationships. Maybe it's that I turn my phone off after 5. That's the expectation, that's the boundary, and I'm going to stick with that. So managing expectations and boundaries is the third component of wellness. We need to lower expectations right now. I'm going to say that one more time. We need to lower expectations right now. If you carried on as business as usual, I would be concerned and we would need to have a conversation, okay? So am I saying that you stop doing your work? No. Am I saying that you overextend yourself because you feel like you can't say no? No. It's all about a balance, but we need to lower expectations right now. Things are unusual. There's no blueprint for how we move through this. This is often forgotten. Your leaders don't know, your colleagues don't know, your friends and family don't know. This is new for all of us. This is new territory, and you need to recognize it and hold space for that. Oftentimes, things can feel really overwhelming, right? There's so many things going on. You might feel out of control. A really helpful strategy is to break the stressor into control, influence, and accept. So you can move through that. What about the stressor can you control? It's not going to be a lot, okay? There might be something you could influence. Can I do something differently in hopes to get a different outcome? And there might be things that you need to just accept. You need to let go. Acceptance doesn't mean you're condoning it. It doesn't mean you're okay with it. It's saying, I'm going to recognize that this feels really crappy and I'm going to let that go. I can't carry it. It's too much energy. I'm exhausting on it. There's a spectrum. This is my favorite. So over these past couple months, I've read a lot about people baking, losing 15 pounds, taking up cross stitch, whatever. And they're like, look at me, this is great. And what I would say to that is, that's awesome. I'm so glad that was helpful for you. For other people, it might not be. So some people overfunction and some underfunction, and there is no right or wrong. What can be harmful is you're seeing all these messages all the time, you're internalizing that, right? Which is then going to create narratives of, you're not doing enough, you're not good enough, why did you buy the cookies? You should have baked the cookies, right? That's where it becomes problematic. So I want you to just pay attention if you start having some of those narratives. I often hear, I'm not doing enough, I'm doing this wrong. No, there is no wrong or right. If you're doing something and it's working, keep doing it. If you're doing something and it's not working, do something else. Okay, you are in charge of really managing expectations and taking care of your needs. Communication and relationships, these are the biggest. Okay, so everything is relational. Your work is relational. Your relationships, your everything, the way we view everything is through connection and relationships. So utilize those relationships to manage your expectations and meet your needs. You are responsible to communicate what the expectations are, right? You are responsible to take care of yourself. Be mindful, flexible, and gentle. These sound kind of cheesy, but I wholeheartedly mean them. Okay, this is a really difficult time and people are struggling in different ways. So be mindful, just take care of yourself, assess how you're doing and come up with a plan or ask for support in taking care of your wellness. So these are some questions with expectations. What expectations have I placed on myself, have others placed on, and have placed on others and have others placed on me? So that's a lot. There's a lot of expectations, right? It can get very blurry very quickly. So think about that. What do I expect of others? What do others expect of me? Did I communicate my expectation or boundary? And in the context of self, professional relationships, personal relationships, ask yourself, am I meeting expectations? Yes or no? I don't know if you are. Are you struggling to meet expectations? Are these expectations realistic now? They might not be, right? You now maybe can't meet that deadline, but before you could have, you need to be flexible. They're going to shift. And do you need to readjust your expectations and boundaries? So boundaries, what are they? Boundaries, simply put, is defining what's okay and what's not okay for you. Requires self-awareness and assessing your needs. So once you're self-aware, you assess your needs, you're like, hey, that doesn't feel okay with me. I perhaps need to put in a boundary. It applies to all areas of your life and ranges in type. What boundaries are not, which a lot of people have a hard time digesting this section. They are not selfish. No, that does not mean you're not a team player. No, it means you're taking care of yourself. They are actually supporting and promoting your well-being. They're not walls, they're not separation, they're not division, and they don't limit your pleasure. They're really there to take care of yourself the best way you can. It's what you can control. So questions to ask about boundaries. Do I have different boundaries dependent on where and who I'm with? My guess is yes. Take a pause, assess what that looks like. What are some easy boundaries I can start communicating and implementing? Right? This might be saying to your partner, I'm feeling really like depleted. Can you please take care of dinner? Whatever it is. What are some boundaries that might take more work, practice, and patience? Some of these are hard. Boundaries are hard and uncomfortable. They're gonna take work. Get clear on what your boundaries are. They're going to be different for each of us. Communicate your boundaries, right? No one's a mind reader. You're responsible to communicate those. Create a plan of action when your boundary is violated. How are you going to repair that? Lean into the relational piece of, who you have a relationship with, a friendship, a meaningful bond with your client, whatever that looks like. Adapt boundaries as needed because they are going to shift and they are going to change. Okay, I'm going to pause there because that was a lot. Any questions? Anything someone wants to share? Comments? And you might just be digesting everything because it's a lot.
Kenny?
Yes.
Can you give us an example of a boundary and communicating and such? Can you give us an example of that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
Let's see. I'm trying to think of one that might be realtor specific. What if it is that you're working with someone and they call you 100 times a day and they text you and they email you and they berate you until they get a response? That might sound true. A boundary would be communicating to that person, hey, Pam, I'm actually available and will be responding to my email from this time to this time. After then, I am offline. The next day, I will be able to get back with you. And this is a boundary. Like, you don't have to say the word boundary, but that would be you putting in place your boundary. I will respond to your email, your text from this hour to this hour. My expectation of myself is that I will respond within 48 hours. And that's the expectation and that's the boundary. And you need to stick to that. And it might be really hard because they keep texting you and keep emailing you even once you've expressed your boundary. But adhering to the boundary and keeping the boundary in play is saying, I'm not going to respond. I already communicated what the boundary was. And so tomorrow at 9 a.m., I will respond. But right now at 9:30 p.m., I'm not going to respond. And holding firm that boundary.
Somebody has their hand up.
Oh, yes, I have an example of boundary. And I want you to tell me if this is all right or not, because sometimes
Sure.
I feel guilty. I am a person that like to be around a lot of people, and I'm like you. In order to me to feel better, I need to be around a lot of people.
Yes.
Lately, I found myself in a different way. I found myself very sensitive to receive information, which before I used to let go and it was easy. But now I'm finding out that there are people that, even though I don't expect them to feel the same way as I do in certain things, they are not respecting what I told them that it's not what I like. For example, quarantine, some people make fun of me because I'm doing it seriously.
Sure.
And things like that. And I noticed that I needed to have a pause. And it doesn't mean that they are not going to be my friends. I keep talking to them over the phone, but I have to establish at this moment, my house is not open.
Absolutely.
And that was a stop. And I think it made me feel good, because at the beginning I felt really guilty.
Yeah.
But then I realized I'm spending the time on things that I need to do.
Yeah.
And it gave me time to actually know myself better.
Absolutely. I am so happy you shared that. Thank you.
You're
So 100% you handled that perfectly. Because I would tell you to assess what your needs are, which you did. You said, I want to not have my house open or whatever it is. And you communicated that. You said, that's how I'm going to meet my need for myself right now. And the part that feels guilty and uncomfortable is because you're putting yourself first over somebody else. And that's very normal and natural. We all feel that way, right? So because you chose to meet your need over somebody else's, it felt uncomfy. But that's exactly what you needed to do. You advocated for your needs, you put a boundary in place, and you actually said, wow, this feels right. This feels good. I'm actually listening to myself and what I need, and I'm honoring that need. So well done. Thanks for sharing that. So the fourth component of wellness is grief. Now, most people are like, grief? Why is this in here? Now, grief is lonely business, and it always has been. But since the pandemic, we've actually utilized grief and brought grief to the table in a different way. So traditionally, we talk about or think about grief as the death of someone. And yes, that is grief, but it also, and in this way, I'm using grief as the death of something. So yes, it could be a loss of a loved one, could be the loss of normal, not working in the office, not commuting, not having a wedding, not being able to see your mom, whatever, not being able to take the vacation that you planned for 2 years. All of those are grief. And most people feel very uncomfortable with grief. So grief can be tangible. That means grief is that 239,000 people have died from COVID. Grief can be intangible, and I feel a heaviness, and perhaps the things that brought me joy don't bring me joy anymore, right? Collective loss of the world we knew before. This is where that call for shared humanity comes into place. Because grief has traditionally always been lonely business, this is actually an opportunity where we have been grieving collectively. We're all going through it, and we all have a loss list that is different and individual to each of us. We have to grieve. This is the part where people are like, nope, I'm going to shove it under the rug and run the other way because I'm not interested. It takes up too much space and I don't want to go there. You have to grieve, whatever this looks like for you. We all grieve differently. Sometimes the easiest way to grieve or to start the process of grieving is just to recognize and name what you've lost. What are you missing? Maybe it's going to brunch with your friends on the weekend. Maybe it's playing in your rec soccer league. Maybe it's being able to meet with your clients and see their smiling faces and know that they like the house, right? The worst loss is always yours. And someone once told me that, and I believe it rings so true. So what you're grieving and what you've lost is valid and real for you. So some questions. What am I grieving? Name it. So sometimes I encourage clients to just write it down, write the list. I want you to see all the things that you've been grieving and carrying with you. Have I allowed myself to grieve? I'm curious to know what the answer is. My guess is that it's no. People are like, there's no time to grieve. I have too much to do. No, you must grieve in order to release it and move forward. Can I share with someone what I'm grieving, right? It can feel very isolating during quarantine and moving through this. You feel very alone. So grief can feel better and lighter if you can share it with someone that you trust and feel comfortable with. And you don't have to use the word grief. You don't have to freak someone out. You can just say, hey, I'm really missing X, Y, and Z. Do you have the emotional space to listen to someone else's grief? Maybe you're like, I feel okay, but I noticed that my colleague is really struggling. The challenge is to just listen, right? Resist the desire to solve. We cannot solve the pandemic right now. There's nothing that you could do, but you could probably just listen and empathize and make that person feel less alone. And the fourth component, I can't even count, is resilience, which is the last component of wellness. So resilience gets thrown around a lot. So let's take a moment to really clear up the myths and talk about what resilience is. So resilience is not hardwired, meaning I have it and you do not. No. We all have resilience. Resilience, you can learn, you can train, you can strengthen. It's just like a muscle. If you're going to the gym, you're working out, you're training and strengthening a muscle that you have. The capacity for resilience is nested within our environments and systems in which we live. So most of the time, resilience and a lot of research and articles that are written about it are very individual focused. You need to do this, and this to enhance your resilience. I want to challenge that. And I want you to look at your resilience and how to strengthen your resilience within the systems you are a part of. Your friends, your family, you might belong to a club, your faith-based community, your association, whatever it looks like to you. Utilize your systems that are already in place as a natural support. Those can help enhance your resilience. Self-awareness, self-regulation, mental agility, right? That growth mindset, strengths of character, connection, and optimism are all research-based findings that enhance your resilience. So you have to practice these in order to enhance your resilience. Resilience isn't like, oh, I'm resilient, and you check a box. Resilience is a lifelong practice. You can enhance your resilience as you move through. So here are some questions that go with resilience. What life experience have illustrated my resilience? I can guarantee that all of you have been through adversity and you have overcome challenging situations and have really illustrated your resilience. Think about those, reflect back on those. What skills and strategies were most effective and helpful for me during that difficult time? I said this before, if it works, keep doing it. If it doesn't, try something else. Don't reinvent the wheel. And then the biggest one, are there opportunities to strengthen my resilience now? Okay, you need to think about how resilient you've been during the pandemic. My guess is very resilient. You've been adaptable, flexible, you've changed, you tried, you failed, you've gotten up again, right? The list goes on and on. You are so resilient. Think about ways and opportunities to strengthen your resilience moving forward. Okay. We have about 9 minutes, so I want to let you guys ask some questions or thoughts. I know that was so much, but we have some time to kind of discuss.
You know, Kenny, it comes to my mind that most of the people on this session are people who are used to being in some level of control. You know, they're professionals who get all the training they can. They do everything. They do all the right things, right? Check, as you said, check off the boxes.
Yep.
And I think it's harder for these folks to go through this pandemic and whatever else is going on because of that, because they're so good at what they do. And I'm just wondering if there are additional coping mechanisms or additional exercises that they can do to get themselves to a point of acceptance, right?
Yeah.
That they can't control a lot of this.
Sure.
And that they're going to be okay.
Absolutely. I mean, I think, and I can relate to that 100% because I am a control freak and I love control. So for me, the control, influence, accept exercise, which I can just show you, you can take a stressor, whatever it is for you, and divide your paper into 3. And you want to just move through the categories of control. So what about the stressor can you control? So give me an example, Pam. Give me one that we can just do as an example.
Well, lack of inventory, lack of housing inventory for all of our members.
Absolutely. So that's the stressor, lack of inventory. What can you control about that? Not a whole lot, can you? Not much. So the lack of inventory, I cannot control the market. I cannot control the inventory. What I can control is checking the database, checking with colleagues, approaching clients, whatever you guys do, that normalcy, right? You have control over that. So maybe that's you getting on every listserv, that's you reaching out to other realtors, you expanding your network, connecting with other folks, right? Sending out flyers, whatever you can control, I need you to focus on that. The influence piece. Now, influence means I can try to control it, right? But there's no guarantee of the end result. So maybe it's me sending an email to my entire network saying, hey, I'm really looking for this. Please let me know if you have anything, blah, blah, blah. Now, I have no influence whether anybody's going to respond or if anybody's going to give me any inventory, right? But that's still something within my sphere of influence, right?
Right.
Now, the acceptance piece. And let me tell you, acceptance is the hardest. It takes the most mastery, and it's really difficult. So acceptance means acknowledging the here and now. So that would mean I am really frustrated with the lack of inventory. This is really annoying. This is really challenging. And like, this is not going my way. I need you to just recognize that and name that. That's the first part of acceptance. Because if you move right to, oh, it is what it is, it's not going to feel good. Okay. So first, recognize the here and now. Then think about the amount of energy you're putting forth towards this stressor. If you're thinking about it all the time, right? You can't sleep, you're just constantly ruminating and obsessing. Ask yourself if that's a good use of your energy. I don't know. It might be. For the moment, it might be that you just want to be mad and stressed and frustrated, and that might meet your need. And then if it's not, if you're like, I don't really know, I don't really feel much better, think about how you can move your energy and put it towards something else. So maybe it's, I'm going to try a new strategy. I'm going to do X, Y, and Z. But the point is that you're recognizing the frustration and then you're able to accept it and let it go a little bit. You're going to feel lighter and freer. I had a boss that was a really big narcissist and I hated working with them and it felt so bad, right? And I pushed and I pushed and I tried and I was like, they're going to change. No. And once I accepted that they would never change and that they are a narcissist, I felt lighter, right? Because I had released some of the control. It's out of my control. I can't control that. The only thing I can control are my responses, my reactions, my behaviors. So try to utilize this simple strategy, right? It seems kind of simple, but it can be very helpful and very relieving in just moving through the categories and listing out the things that you have control over. There's not that many, but the ones in the acceptance category might be longer.
Right.
So
And a couple of folks have jumped in here and talked
yeah,
about Heather saying, I can educate potential sellers about the amazing sellers market.
yes.
And Marie says we have more time to reach out and keep in touch with our sphere of influence.
Absolutely. Those are great examples for the influence, right? You can tell your clients, you can, send emails and flyers and X, Y, and Z, but there's no guarantee that they're going to say, yeah, I want to buy a house, right? Or I want to sell my house. So focus on what you can control, what's in your sphere of influence, and you're going to have to let some things go and you're going to resist it.
Right.
Like that's just a normal response.
And do you think another important thing here is to realize that this is not going to last forever?
Absolutely.
Right.
Remind yourself that this is temporary.
Yeah.
Yes, this is temporary. And I am going to focus on the things I can control. Like if, we're using the pandemic, what I can control is wearing a mask. What I can control is not leaving my house. What I can control is not going to a restaurant. You need to determine what you can control and your sphere of influence. It looks different for each of us. So try to focus on those and write them out, because some of these problems and stressors are so enormous. It feels paralyzing to know even how to work through it and make the most of it. So try to focus on what you can control, influence, and what you need to accept. I want to make sure we have time before we leave. I have a couple other additional resources. So I'm not sure if you have employee assistance programs through your employer. You can check out your health insurance to see if you have therapeutic services within your insurance. If not, and you're interested in seeing a therapist or you feel like you need some additional support, you can check out Psychology Today. That's a great starting place. You can filter down into gender, degree, expertise, location, payment, you name it. And so if you feel like you need professional support, that's a great resource for you to start with. NAMI is our National Alliance of Mental Illness. They have a helpline. They have local resources. If you need more tips or tricks on how to build resilience, how to find a support group, whatever it is, it's a great resource. I said I wouldn't push meditation, and I'm not going to, but I will tell you that I use Insight Timer and the Calm app. They are both free. I have a really hard time falling asleep at night. So they have meditations, they have musical things, they have book things, they have so many resources. It's really great, and they're both free. Also, a lot of news platforms, so HuffPost, New York Times, ABC Today, have developed online wellness series since the pandemic has started. So they've actually launched wellness platforms within their hub. So if you receive your news from one of these sources, I would encourage you to see if they have a wellness series. My guess is that they do. And I've been reading, and a lot of the articles are really helpful. They're very validating. They have some great suggestions and additional resources. My colleague works at the VA and developed the COVID Coach app. And so this is more if you want to track your resilience over time. They have assessments. They talk about how you manage stress. They have games and really more. They have lectures and series and more information and resources that you can access. Same with the Resilience app through the Resilience Institute. They're kind of a national leader in this arena. They have research papers, lectures, workshops, webinars, tools and resources, all to help strengthen your resilience. Lastly, here is my email and my LinkedIn. I'm more than happy to talk with any of you offline. If there's something you're really struggling with, you have a question, I'd love to hear from you. You're more than happy to reach out to me. And that's it, right at 11 on the dot.
Whoa, 11 your time.
Oh, right, 11 my time. You're all like, what?
Right.
Right.
This has been wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you enough, Penny. And I want to tell all of those of you on this event that we are here for you. We really miss you tremendously. We miss you in real time. But we do know that better days are coming. So we're holding on to that thought. And if there's anything that we can do for any of you, please don't hesitate to reach out. My email is pcroak@bucksrealtor.com. Staff is always available to you. And I thank you all. Kenny, thank you for a wonderful
Yeah.
presentation.
Absolutely.
And,
And I can make the slides available to you, Pam. I'll send
great.
them to you.
Great. That was one of the questions that was
Yep.
in the chat. So we will make sure that everyone gets that. And again, this is going to be available. The recording of this will be available to our membership. And we have that to look forward to. And we can all go back and look at it again, you know, in a calmer part of the day, maybe.
Yeah, by
Thank you.
yourself, you can go with it, over it with a friend or a spouse or, maybe one of your kids who's struggling. So, it
Right.
relates to all of us.
It
So,
does. It does. Many, many thanks. And
yes.
I'll just say to everyone, keep your eyes on your newsletters for future education events. I know we have a flood factor event coming up next week. We have Hank Lerner coming back to talk about advertising. And we're actually starting to plan into the new year. So these education events are going to continue. And many thanks to our education committee at BCAR and to the staff and to all of you for showing up. Thank you. Thanks,
Thank you.
everyone. Have a great